Please like, well, no, subscribe, like, comment. No, don't have a video today or at this point, but I have some thoughts. They're just are recurring thoughts, actually. I was watching a video the day that made me think about these things, and that is the demise of culture. Doesn't matter whose culture it is. Culture is can come to a demise in a whole variety of ways, and in the United States we've been going through a pretty significant demise, and in Europe they've been going to an extreme demise, uh, and it's something we have to ask ourselves: is it important? Now, in one respect, it's not important. Our humanity is more important than our culture. That is, the things we share with other humans is more important than any culture. Um, as coming from a Christian perspective, if you read the Gospels and what Jesus said, he pretty much denounced culture. That is, you can't put anything cultural ahead of your relationship with God. But uh, culture is not necessarily a bad thing. It's sort of a glue that ties us together in ways that we share things that we don't have to be intimate about to share. Okay, so we go to a football game or a baseball game or a soccer game, and the people who are there with you, you don't even know them. They come from other places. You sit there and you have conversations and talk about what's going on, and you participate in the culture of being a fan in a particular way. It's so some people dress up in all kind of weird ways and everything, and the fellow fans don't say, "Oh, you must leave. You should not wear a cheese uh, cheese block on your head." For the I think it's the Packers that have that, or whatever it might be. People who dress up in all kind of crazy ways. So uh, we have culture that we share, and that helps to bind us together. That shouldn't be the main thing that binds us together, but it does. It does bind us together. So there's people who I was talking to a client, and he said, "I'm a Gillis," and he said his name was Gillis, and he's for some reason he brought up that he was about to go, and I said I knew Gillis's, and he said, "Oh, really?" And he was going to go to his family reunion, this Gillis reunion up in southeast Georgia, where this whole huge clan of Gillises, because they're Scottish, so they have their clans. These Gillises are going to get together every year, and it's a big deal. And sure, I knew Gillises who actually live in that area, and I'm sure sometimes have participated in that. Uh, so, uh, we share things because we're part of a greater community of people who we're related to in different kind of ways. We have our culture in that way as well. Um, but been seeing over the last at least decade uh, with the wars, the uprising and wars, Syrian war in the Middle East and everything, people just pouring out of the Middle East and going up into Northern Europe. Well, man, talk about a clash of culture. Um, it's one thing. It's enough. It may be enough to be a person from Florida going up to live in Maine. Okay, that could be a particular kind of culture shock, and you might have ancestors from England or whatever, right? Yes, you share ancestors, you share something culturally, but it's you're going to go up and experience something different, the way people see the world. Certainly, something like going from a culture of a city to the culture of a more rural community. um, that was something as I grew up in the South, having Yankees, as we would call them, coming from up north, come down to our little small town cities, and you know, they behaved in different ways that, which might have been more typical where they're from than we were used to. So that's certainly a huge culture shock going from Syria and having a totally different worldview that many of them did because they were Islamic instead of people from a Christian heritage. And yes, there may not be a whole lot of Christians in Europe these days. I mean, that's been on the downhill side for a few hundred years. But so there might not be many people who are really church going and really embedded in the culture of the church, but their culture is based on a Christian culture, Christian worldview. And so obviously there's a clash there. And we see in the news from time to time where these things actually come out and are pretty drastic, pretty serious conflicts in worldview. And because one culture is a culture that says, as long as I'm doing what I'm supposed to do under our particular set of rules of our religion, then I'm a good person. And the other person says, well, other one says you shouldn't be, attacking that woman, right? That's the way so they're looking at these incidents from different perspectives, and it's not just that, but other kind of things. So a clash, and so and why is this going on? For one thing, I mean, obviously, historically, you might have had a place like Britain that had an empire around the world, so it may have people from India or China, or maybe from somewhere in Africa, certainly Australia, who, because their empire wrapped around the world, somebody from those other countries in time decided to come to Britain for whatever their purposes were. And, because they connected with the British overlords in their particular countries and gain relationship, and maybe they thought, oh, I need to go get a education in Britain, those kind of things. So you can see where some people slowly integrate around the world from one place to another, and they move one place, and then they have to assimilate to the new place because they are such a vast minority compared to what exists in their new home. Then you have places like maybe Boston, the New England areas where things like the famine in Ireland, a lot of Irish left and came to the United States, and other people for other kind of persecutions and things like that in Europe came over. Well, it's one thing to be Irish and be living in the midst of a lot of people who are basically an English background. That's not quite the same conflict as because the Irish would also come from a Christian perspective, etc. They might add a few peculiarities, we call them. One might call them we, not we. I wasn't there. Same thing. You had people who would come over at different times from like places like Italy or whatnot. That's a little bit more of a culture shock, maybe, but they're still Europeans. You know, they may have this European mindset, right? But we really have had some situations where large populations are moving to new places and at places where they're not trying to assimilate. That's the key thing. When I was in undergraduate school and studying sociology, that was a major concept, assimilation. That's what people do. You move from one place to another, and then you assimilate. Whether it's you're coming from one country to another, or whether you're coming from the country, a rural area, to a city, were you coming from the north to the south of the United States, or the east to the west United States, or the plains of the United States to the big cities, whatever it might be, there's assimilation that happens. Uh, you know, And unfortunately, a lot of people aren't really into assimilating. They're just wanting, they want to have what they want, and they want to bring it with them, because their concept is not that I'm coming to be part. I remember a while back, I had a new house got built very right behind me over there, and a young couple moved in, and they were from the country, and everything was fine. And then something, I think, the marriage broke up. And the young man built a bonfire in his backyard. Now he drove a pickup truck and everything. This was like 20 years ago. Built a pickup truck in his excuse me, built a bonfire in his backyard, and got drunk and started driving over his bonfire uh, with his truck. Now, this might be something one might do out if you lived out in the middle of the country. I can see somebody building a bonfire in your backyard. Uh, Whoopee, nobody's around, it's no concern to anybody, nobody to be seen around you hardly. Maybe your other neighbor is 500 yards away if they're that close to you. So, you live a certain way. You park your cars wherever you want to in your yard. Nobody cares. But when you move into a subdivision, well, there's a certain, practices that people do. So anyway, my point simply is you need to assimilate. You can't just bring your way of living into this new situation and think that you're not going to run into some kind of issues. And maybe your neighbor doesn't say anything to you, but you're still creating a problem. You need to be aware that, I remember one day there were some guys working on their car in front yard, uh, right as I was taking a walk in the evening, and it was like 8:30, and they had their music going blasting. And I stopped and I said, "Hey guys, look, that house across the street there has babies, has little children, and they're probably they may be going to sleep at 8:30. So you ought to turn your music down." And then they understood that. They weren't thinking it wouldn't have been a big problem if it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So, but under the circumstance, there's certain things you assimilate. You assimilate certain practices to get along with the people around you and to be part of the culture. But that's not going on where you have large. This is an issue I remember back when I was a youth, and they integrated the schools. Well, the school I went to, we all got along fine, right? But there were in another school system nearby, they had all kind of riots and fights and everything else. And why? Because I'm sure this is my analysis of it, is that where I was at, there weren't many black people. Okay, and so they came into our school from whatever schools they were going to. They came into our school where I'd been going, and we made friends. There was nobody there. It was where you didn't have enough a group of anyone of the minority. You didn't have a big enough group of the minority so that they could maybe feel like, oh, we need to have our thing. Okay, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying that's the reality of it. See, whereas in the other schools there were large populations, and the minority could get together and say, "Hey, we deserve to be able to do a particular kind of thing," or maybe that's not their issue. Maybe they were just troublemakers in the group who were making up issues that weren't really important, because obviously we weren't having issues at my school. Okay, and these guys were my friends, so stuff like that. We just didn't have an issue any more than I had with any other kid at my school, right? I mean, you're a nice person, you're a nice person. If you're a jerk, you're a jerk. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. That's all there is to it. So anyway, but my point is um, that when you have large populations as you've got people moving from Syria up into Germany, etc., you have large populations of a particular culture, then you're more likely to have clashes because people assume they have the right to maintain their culture, okay? And they don't care about the new culture because they have other people around them to practice their culture with. They don't have to assimilate. They can just hide behind their walls and do their own thing. And then when they come out, they just clash, right? So, that kind of stuff is going on. That's not the only. Then we've got right now what's going on in the United States with the new administration is you've got people who have been coming into the United States illegally across the border without going through proper channels, and by the millions, millions. I was listening to somebody talk about it. It was like 30 million people. That's just mind-boggling. Now, not everybody are from the country of Mexico. There are people from all over the world coming, but a large portion of them, obviously, are going to be from Mexico or the countries, down through Central America and into South America. And there's documentation of how they're coming from down around Ecuador. I can't remember the name of the pass, so-and-so pass down there, where a highway has been built down all the way through Central America. Central America down there, and it stops. The terrain is so poor that they can't build the highway through this terrible jungle. But people come through the jungle, through it. It's a rough hike, and people get sick, people die, etc. But they're coming up. Many from South America. Some people coming over from China to that still the same location, and then coming up from Ecuador. But interestingly, I was listening to a conversation today, the one that actually made me start thinking about this, and they were talking about how many of the people who are from Mexico who have come into our country are people who are from a how lower class. I don't know if that's really the word to use, but they're from they're indigenous peoples who aren't part of the more upper class Mexican mix of people. Okay, who are looked down upon, who are maybe a drag on society because you know they're down. They have less. They produce less for society, and society needs to help them out. That's I'm not an expert on the topic. I'm just trying to give you an example that they're at the lower realm, socioeconomic realm, and cultural realm in their own country. Uh, so they're indigenous peoples, and so the government apparently is very happy for them to come to the United States. Come on, leave, go to the United States, and that way the government doesn't have to help them out, right? And they can live in the United States, and that's fine with the government. So a lot of these people are these people who whereas like maybe people traditionally people from northern Mexico who might know some English, etc., who might have some traffic, some exposure to the American culture because they're from northern Mexico, and Americans going down there, etc., and maybe family members coming back as seasonal workers or whatever they might be. Those people would be the normal people who would come up. But here in the last few years, it's been a lot of these people from way down south who are not American, and American as in United States. They don't relate in any way. It's total culture shock for them and for us, for that matter, right? I know there's a city, a town in either Arizona or New Mexico. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's a development, huge development of really low end kind of trailers and other kind of abodes for people, and people basically nobody there speaks English. They're all illegal aliens or other a mixture of illegal mixture of maybe legal immigrants and illegal immigrants. But They don't speak English, so they're not at all assimilating into anything, right? So this is not working out too good for a lot of people for that reason. And the point that they were making is that this discussion that was being made was that these this particular newer group of all these folks pouring over into the United States is they're not coming here to assimilate. Whereas used to people would have want to be part of the American dream. They'd come, be part of America, go through the immigration process and the naturalization process, move into communities, be part of a greater community. They didn't just move into their own little ghetto of their own culture, and they were came to the United States to be a citizen of the United States to a large extent. Whereas these folks are basically coming to make money and send back home, etc. Okay, we're just they're it's like somebody from Florida going to Alaska to you know log for a few years in order to make a whole lot of money logging because they can make more money. Or after these hurricanes that hit occasionally and tear things apart, you'll have people who will leave Florida and go to Louisiana or go from Louisiana to South Carolina. They'll spend 6 months or something, working to clear debris and things like that to help build houses back. Because now there's a big demand to build houses, the construction people, and they're going there to make a buck, and then they're going to go back home. Well, that's what these folks are basically doing. They're coming to the United States to make a buck. They can send money back to their family. They're used to living subsistently in a lot of ways, so they're not coming to the United States to build a mansion. They're just coming to live in the same kind of place they lived at home and send as much money as they can home, that kind of thing. But they're not assimilating. That's the point. And to me, as I've watched this stuff now for actually decades, but especially for the last decade, it just strikes me that it is apparent that this is all something that's being done on purpose, and the purpose is to destroy culture. The idea, I believe, is that the people who are taking advantage of this, who are causing this, their goal is that, well, if it, it's just like I said about the incident with integration when I was a kid. If we can, if we can make people not have a shared culture, if we can destroy their culture, if we can if we can make the French stop being French, and the Germans stop being Germans, then we can. They won't have as much dedication to who they are, and we can impose our will on them with our great new ideas on how to make their lives better. Um, you know, Another thing I saw just here in a different video the other was a short. You might have seen it on Twitter, X, whatever it's called. Uh, was a mother who was bemoaning the fact that she was Irish, and she was bemoaning the fact that her child, who was in elementary school, came home and was crying, and she says, "Why are you crying?" And she says, "Because I don't understand what the other students are saying." She's Irish. She's the only child who is Irish in her class. They live in a neighborhood that's been taken over by immigrants from other countries who don't even speak English. And so the child, except whenever they're working on their schoolwork, the child does not talk. Um, the child doesn't hear them speak English. They speak in their own language, whatever it might be. Spanish, I don't know. Maybe it's Arabic. I have no idea. I don't know. But it's foreign. Okay. I Where I live, we've had because of hurricanes and things like that, we've had big. Uh, what's the word? A lot of folks from who don't whose heritage is not who are islanders have come to the United States, and I'm all the time. I was taking a walk with my wife today around my neighborhood, and there's this man calling out to, I assume was his grandson. I don't know because I don't speak their language. I, I go places all the time where people, I very seldom, if I'm in public, I seldom hear anybody speaking English. Now, I'm sure that my guess and my expectation is that the vast majority of these people actually are bilingual. Okay. But my point is that at home, they ain't speaking English. All right. And they're not teaching, they're teaching their children to be bilingual as well. Right. And, uh, and so at home, everybody's speaking Spanish, I guess, because when they're sitting at the table next to me in the restaurant, or standing in the aisle at the grocery store, or I'm in the gas station, everybody's speaking Spanish, right? Those people are holding on to their own culture. So, if you can wipe out, if you can mix up all the cultures enough where, at some point, where I live right now is not going to be what it was 20 years ago, because there's people from a slightly different culture. Uh, a Caribbean culture is probably going to be a lot more like a regular American culture than it would be from somebody coming from uh, Saudi Arabia, right? Um, so it's not as big a clash, but nonetheless, in time, there's right now. Here's an example: fireworks. Well, my whole life, fireworks has been maybe at 12 o'clock on New Year's Eve, maybe, and on the 4th of July. That's pretty much it. And occasionally somebody might fire. I remember we would play with firecrackers and stuff when I was a kid sometimes. But we weren't shooting off skyrockets and everything. And we had firecrackers because we actually used them to scare off birds from our pecan trees and who were eating our nuts. So we had them for a legitimate reason instead of shooting them with a gun. But so my point is, now there's fireworks going off all the time, and they go off for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours all throughout the day, and they go off for days on end, and because and obviously I think some people just seems like somebody had a party, like a birthday party the other day, and they were doing fireworks, right? So that's a culture clash. Okay. Fortunately, as I say, it's not as huge of a culture clash for me as it could be if they came from somewhere totally different in the world, maybe. But we have our cultures. They help us to maintain sort of this civility between each other. They help us to understand each other. But this has been going on a long time, and and some of it's been going on. While I think that yes, I think there was a plan. Those people moving from Syria all the way up into Germany and Scandinavia, and France, etc. That was allowed and actually pushed by people who had an ulterior motive. That they were, of course, they're acting like they're being so good and loving, right? But I think that if when you love people, you don't let them get by with stuff, right? And I mean, with my kids, if you are letting your kids get by and do anything they want to do, and have their own kid culture, then you're not loving them, because the point that you're trying to do as a parent is help them become adults, and there is an assimilation process that goes along from being a child to an adult. So if you let your children wear furry costumes to school on a day that is not Halloween, then you're not helping your child, because they're not learning to assimilate into the culture. So we got all this BS kind of stuff that has been taught within our own culture in recent decades about how everybody needs to be their own person, and that's just a pile of hooey. It's yes, we do need to be our own person within parameters, because we need to make sure that people actually can recognize us as a person and not as some weird thing, right? So you have to become a person, and an adult person, not a bear or a lion or whatever else in the world that you might like to fantasize about being, right? So assimilation, assimilate. We assimilate all kind of different ways. That's not necessarily a pure sociological use of the word there. Definition, as I'm talking about furry bears, the furries and whatnot. But you know, when I started this video, I was talking about the demise of our culture. And one thing that I think about being part of that demise is the ongoing onslaught of the new. New, 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 new. So when I was a child, you knew songs like On Top of Old Smoky or Oh Susanna. Now, I don't know whether children today ever hear these songs or not. Okay? But these were songs that I knew and my parents knew, right? Everybody I knew. Itsy Bitsy Spider, whatever the songs might be. Maybe you know those songs. Maybe some people do sing those songs today. But there's so much new stuff. So what are kids singing today? They're singing some song by some cartoon witches, right? They're singing some song, some weird song. We have popular music bringing up new songs, so there's new songs to add to our culture constantly. Not like some famous singer in New York sings a particular song. Let's say "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes," right? There's a play that is done in New York, and so there. How many plays might be done in New York at a time? Maybe within a year, 10 plays or something, 20 plays or something. I don't know, but certainly not thousands of plays, and coming up with new songs to introduce to the culture. And of course, out of that play, maybe only one song becomes a song that anybody actually carries, sings in another dance hall or auditorium somewhere else, right? Whereas for you and me, I would get a Beatles album, and we got all those songs to sing. Okay, and everybody around me is getting the same Beatles album who is my age, but our parents don't know anything about that music. They can't share in it, right? Of course, they would have go on Ed Sullivan, so maybe our parents would learn some songs, right? And some things would be on the radio enough. But my main point is you keep having new music, new fashions, new everything all the time, and that tends to dilute things for culturally. The culture doesn't stay as strong. You understand what I'm saying? Maybe your parents around the house would sing a particular song, so you know that song because your parents would sing that song, hum it, sing it, etc. And so you're 30 years old, and all of a sudden it comes on the radio, and it's like, oh, I know that song. That's a great song. I love that song, right? But if you had not heard your parents singing it, you would not have known the song at all. That's a song that you have in common with your parent. But when we have all these new songs coming on, there's all kind of new music that means, and what on top of that we can listen now on the internet. You can select whatever you want to listen to. So if you like hip hop, you listen to hip hop. If you like rap, you listen to rap. You don't even hear, years ago when you had top 40, you would hear a sort of a mixture of things to a degree, but now you can just sort of be in your own world. Everything is in your own world. That's the way they like it. You can electronically be in your own world. You can put on earphones and be in your own world. But you're allowed to be in that world just by yourself. But they don't want you to assimilate and have everybody be together in the same world, right? Anyway, that's maybe sort of an extreme example, but we're just not quite the same culture that we weren't once were. And so, what should we do about that? What would you do about it? Certainly, you've got this whole MAGA thing that's happened over the last several years. So there's certain aspects that people really feel strongly about. They know what they don't like, and they know what they want. That particular, it's a pretty broad group of people that at one time didn't even know each other existed, right? They were just sort of going, you had a group over on this side going, well, this is the way the world's going to be. And if you're a good and righteous person, you have to hop on board, even though these are crazy new ideas that no one ever thought was right 10 years ago. But now we've got these new ideas that everybody has to do. So these other people over on this side were going individually in their home, wondering what's going on in the world. And finally, they got unified. But we don't need just to have that MAGA thing going on in the world, right? I mean, just those, we need everybody to be unified. We need a culture where we need an American culture. And so I don't know what the answer is. I hope somebody can get it together and help us to find ways of sharing culture again in a way that we've sort of lost it in many ways. Anyway, those are just my thoughts about the demise of culture. Again, for God, we need no culture. We just need God. But to get along with each other, having a little bit of culture is nice. We just can't let our culture get in the way of our relationship with God. Anyway, give your own comments, subscribe, like, and we'll talk to you another time.